Six digits.
What's up, fam? Welcome to another episode of Six Figures to Bigger Figures. This is my story of how I inherited, lost, regained, and will surpass a six-figure net worth. And I bring you guys along with me for the journey. All I ask is that you like, share, and subscribe to at 6FTBF. Now, the title of this episode is The Path is All Math. All right. Now, first of all, let me say no disrespect to all my traveling men out there. I don't want no smoke. My motivation comes from Rick Ross, a fire line from Rick Ross. First, I like that track, one, because it's a pretty good track, features Jay-Z, pretty good production. Two, he's trolling, and the troll in me enjoys that. And three, there's some truth to it, right? The path is all math, right? The path that we're on, the path of financial freedom, path of financial security, it is math. It's numbers, right? But a lot of times when persons who aren't accountants or aren't, mathematicians or finance people, you start talking to them in terms of math and it gets intimidating. And you shouldn't be intimidated by it, right? You should embrace it. Because numbers, metrics, are probably the most objective means of measuring just about anything, right? It's not subjective. It doesn't have any feelings. It is what it is. And that's what you want. You want something to just be completely factual and give you what it is. Don't sugarcoat it, right? That's why I like numbers. That's why I guess people like to say I'm a numbers guy. It doesn't mean I'm super great at math, because I'm okay, But it's objective. It is what it is, okay? And that came abundantly clear for me in my role as a business analyst. So I was a business analyst for two companies. And although the companies are completely different in what they did and how they performed, one being a completely fantastic company, Fortune 50 company, and one being, even though they were so different, they all went by the same concept of developing what they call key performance indicators, or KPIs, right? Now, KPIs are measurable values that demonstrate how effectively a company is achieving its key business objectives. Numbers, metrics, right? Objective. And in my role as a business analyst, I would take data that came from accounting, crunch it, process it, put it in Excel, put it in different formulas, and sometimes we make very complicated formulas to come up with these metrics, to then take that and give it to someone on the executive level who aren't necessarily who don't care about the details in that matter. They just want the big picture. And the big picture for them is numbers. Okay? There's margin, there's EBITDA, there's take rate, earnings per share, the number of different metrics that a company may use, and it just changes depending on what industry that company is in. Now, I've said this before and I'll say it again. If a company, a Fortune 50 company, or let's say all companies for that matter, I'll go on a limb and say all companies for that matter, have KPIs and their structures in place to measure those KPIs and to achieve those KPIs. And if there's a variance between what the objective or the target is versus what we actually came in at, there's going to be an explanation, or there's going to be a process that's going to go trigger some type of action to make sure that this key performance indicator is met. So then you have to ask yourself, if it's good enough for these companies, then why is it not good enough for you? And the answer is, it is good enough for you. We just need to know what KPIs we need to use for ourselves. Pretty sure you know it already, but I want to package 3 KPIs for you that if you focus on these 3 things, I can almost guarantee that you're going to turn your financial life, you can do a 180 in your financial plans, okay? Let's start with the basics, right? I'm going to call this your emergency savings ratio. And that is your savings divided by your monthly expenses. That number, you want it to be at least 4. And what that means is you have enough savings to cover 4 months of expenses, right? This is what they do, right? They give these things fancy names and, leverage ratio and debt to equity, liquidity, profitability. They call it all these nice fancy words, right? But these are very simple concepts. The concepts are very simple. In fact, I had a supervisor at when I was a business analyst that would say, it's just math. Now, when he first said it, especially when I'm trying to crunch numbers late at night, it comes off like a jerk thing to say, right? I'm like, okay, shut up, you're not helping. But he was right. Sometimes we need to step back and understand and realize that the bigger picture is simple, right? High means good, low means bad, essentially. Conceptually, the concepts are very simple, okay? So back to the first goal, emergency savings ratio. Take your savings divided by your monthly expenses. So what I'm saying is that target number should be 4, meaning you should have at least 4 months of 4 months of expenses saved. If your number is under 4, then we need to work on that, right? You have a variance. You have an unfavorable variance. Again, more fancy words for saying you need to step your game up, right? Simple concept. I like to keep that number between 4 and 6. Anything above 6, in my opinion, is diminishing returns. If you have 8 months, 12 months of savings or of emergency savings, my question to you is, why are you doing that? What are you using that for? Any money outside of emergencies or money that you're saving for something specific, maybe a house, maybe a car, or maybe a big purchase, anything outside of that is actually a waste, right? Your money should be working for you. It's not something that you get value by just watching it. That's not how money works. You want your money to work for you. You should hate lazy money, right? And money just sitting in a savings account just because you want to look at it to make you feel good is lazy money. You want to put the money to work, okay? But I'm preaching. Reel it back. Second thing, credit score. That's easy enough. The magic number here, or the target number here, is 740. And I can do an entire episode on credit scores, to be honest. But for right now, I'll say 740 because that is the number by law in which you will get the best mortgage rates and best consumer rates by law. Some people like to show off and say, hey, my score is 830, my score is that, my score is 790. At the basis of it, once you have a 740, that's all you need. Anything above that is just, you're just showing off, right? So number 740. And third, I'm going to call it your hurdle rate, right? That is the interest rate in which you're either paying or you're receiving. And your target is 2%. Now I use 2% because on average, that is the average inflation rate. Inflation meaning the increase in prices of cost of goods over time, right? So some bread, milk, and eggs today, in theory, is going to cost more in the future, right? The cost of goods are constantly rising. And the reason why I use that number is if you're paying anything below that, then you're beating inflation. And I think inflation is a good target, right? It's a good metric to watch as far as interest rates are concerned. Anything above that, if you're paying it, is bad, right? Or is too much, unless you're making money on that. That's above your expense, right? And then in that case, we're talking margin now, right? Expense, revenue, middle, margin. Keeping it simple, okay? So now what I want you to do, I want you to look at everything you spend money on. Look at it in terms of rate of return, okay? What are you getting in exchange for this money that you're spending? Can you put it in a rate? And most things that you can put in a rate. There's some things that we're not gonna do this exercise for, right? You need food, water, shelter. Your basic physiological needs, we get that. If you start looking at everything you do in terms of a rate of return, then it's gonna force you to think about things a little bit differently, okay? What are you getting in exchange for this money that you're spending? Once you start thinking about things in terms of rate of return, then things like credit card interest, things like student loan interest, things like your mortgage interest or your car note interest, those things, it hits different, right? You look at them differently. And then things like savings account interest, dividend interest, interest income, or rate of return on the sale of an asset, rate of return on your stock investments, right? Those things then become more important to you, right? Because now you're thinking in terms of rates of return. And rates of return, they're very objective, right? Now, in some cases, there's materiality, right? There's big numbers, low numbers, medium numbers, whatever. But the rate of the return is the rate of the return. And once you start looking at things like in those terms, then you really get to put an objective value on certain items, right? So now you know if you're paying 15%, 17%, sometimes 20, 25% on a credit card, that means in layman's terms, you're paying a lot, okay? That's a lot of money that you are paying above the inflation rate, okay? Those are the three things I want you to think about. I want us to think about your emergency savings ratio, your credit score, and the hurdle rate, or let's call it the rate of inflation. And in everything that you spend, or in everything which you expect a return on, you want to make sure you spend under 2% and make sure you gain above 2%. 2% is what we call our hurdle. Another fancy word, hurdle. Just means, our target. Another way of saying target. That's the thing. I'm gonna give you guys a little insight on finance. We get together and we come up with fancy names for simple concepts just to make ourselves sound smart. All right, and then intimidate people, and then people think we're like super smart and stuff. They're all really simple terms, right? Conceptually, now there's some very difficult things out there, I'm not gonna front, but conceptually, it's just math. All right, peace.
It's 6 digits.